The new recruit never imagined that on his very first day reporting for duty, war would suddenly erupt. Because there was no time to complete registration, he had no identity and no official military status, yet he fought alone in the ruins for 300 days like a truly fearless warrior.
Плужников никак не мог понять.
When the German troops finally encountered him, his eyes were blind, his uniform was in tatters, and he held an empty rifle in his hands, and his first words were, "I am a Russian soldier." On June 22, 1941, Lieutenant Nikolai, who had just stepped out of the gates of the military academy, arrived at Brest Fortress full of hope to report for duty. At that moment, several flashes of light suddenly streaked across the sky above the fortress. At first, everyone thought it was thunder, until explosions erupted beside them and they realized this was not thunder at all. But bombs, Nazi bombs tore apart the Soviet-German non-aggression pact, and war broke out. Once Nikolai regained his senses, he suddenly remembered that he had not yet completed his enlistment registration, and immediately sprinted toward the regimental headquarters. Without an official military identity, he would have no weapon, earn no honors, and even if he died, there would be no compensation. When Nikolai struggled out of the bunker, the scene before him froze him in place. The once majestic fortress had been reduced to ruins, panicked soldiers fleeing in all directions like headless flies, many dying under the relentless bombing. Suddenly, a bomb fell from the sky, and Nikolai was instantly stunned by the blast. Before he could recover, another bomb exploded nearby, and the powerful shockwave hurled him into the air. Just as he struggled back to his feet, yet another bomb landed directly in front of him, cutting off his path. Fortunately, it was a dud, and Nikolai narrowly escaped with his life. Still shaken, he abandoned the thought of reporting and instinctively rushed toward the ammunition depot. No matter what, the fortress gate had to be defended, but as he reached the Terraspol gate, another violent explosion mercilessly blasted him away, slamming him hard into a shell crater. When Nikolai groggily woke up, he discovered that German troops had already stormed the fortress and were mercilessly mowing down the scattered Soviet soldiers. As Nikolai tried to struggle to his feet, a Soviet soldier beside him quickly covered his mouth. The Germans were already right in front of them, and they could only lie among the corpses and pretend to be dead. After the Germans left, the soldier trembled and asked, "Where do we run?" Clenching his teeth, Nikolai replied, "There is nowhere to run." There was no fear in his eyes, only fire. "We cannot run. We must go to the armory, take weapons, and hold the fortress." Taking advantage of the Germans being distracted, they suddenly burst out of the crater and sprinted toward the armory. Every second that followed became a race between life and death. Along the way, Nikolai jumped into another shell crater, where several Soviet soldiers were holding out with weapons in hand. Nikolai picked up a pistol from the ground and decisively joined the fight. But the bullets were quickly exhausted, and he had no choice but to continue charging toward the armory. The Germans soon spotted him, and dense gunfire poured down like a storm. Fortunately, Nikolai reacted quickly and dove into the ruins just in time, narrowly escaping death. But inside were only wounded soldiers, with no usable weapons at all. Anxious and desperate, Nikolai risked his life to go back outside and spotted a soldier sitting nearby. As he stepped forward to ask for the exact location of the armory, he realized the man was already dead. Was he desperate? Of course, but Nikolai did not stop. At last, he reunited with the main force inside a damaged building. When the regimental commander saw the lieutenant insignia on his shoulder, he immediately appointed him as his adjutant. 5 minutes later, he was ordered to lead another squad to attack the windows on the left side of the church. Although Nikolai had not even completed formal registration, the situation was critical, and he had no time to worry about that. Immediately accepting the mission and organizing the soldiers to deploy their tactics, with a single command, Soviet soldiers launched a heroic counterattack, charging toward the central high ground of the fortress, the church. At this moment, the German forces had just taken the fortress, their troops scattered in defenses not yet established, and they were caught completely off guard by the fierce Soviet counterattack. Soon unable to hold and retreating in disorder back into the church, the Soviet forces pressed their advantage, and in this confined space both sides engaged in brutal close-quarters combat. After a night of blood-soaked fighting, the Soviets, at the cost of heavy casualties, successfully recaptured the core area of the fortress. This was the first victory with a clear military objective achieved by the Soviet army since the outbreak of the war. Afterward, the regimental commander entrusted Nikolai with the defense of the church and went to the rear to seek reinforcements. The Germans naturally refused to give up and launched several counterattacks that very night, all of which were fiercely repelled by the Soviets. But every soldier knew that darkness limited German operations, and once dawn came, a larger assault was inevitable. As expected, at first light the Germans gathered massive forces and launched a fierce attack on the church. German remnants hiding in the church basement also seized the moment to break out, throwing the defending Soviets into chaos. Seeing they could not hold, Nikolai had no choice but to lead his comrades in a temporary retreat, and the church once again fell into enemy hands. After occupying the church, the Germans broadcast a surrender ultimatum, promising lenient treatment if the Soviets surrendered within 1 hour. Otherwise they would unleash a devastating assault. But they clearly underestimated the Soviet will to fight and determination. Taking advantage of the brief window while the Germans waited for surrender, Nikolai quickly gathered his forces and launched a counterattack. At that moment, the Germans were still indulging in the illusion that the Soviets would surrender and had let down their guard. By the time they realized what was happening, Soviet troops had already charged to the base of the church. Guided by the red flag, the brave Soviet soldiers launched a fearless assault. The Germans were thrown into panic and could not resist. As the Soviets once again stormed the church and engaged in close combat. The overwhelming momentum of the Soviets caused the Germans to collapse instantly, the remaining troops fleeing in terror, and the church returned once more to Soviet hands. But after retaking the church twice, ammunition was now critically low. Nikolai decided to lead one soldier to another armory in search of supplies. But halfway there, they were discovered by a German patrol. The soldier turned back and signaled Nikolai to run, then suddenly lunged at the Germans. Nikolai immediately ran back, but unexpectedly 2 German soldiers arrived and blocked his path. Unarmed and with no other choice, Nikolai raised his hands and pretended to surrender. A German war correspondent excitedly pulled out his camera, eager to capture this humiliating moment. At this critical instant, Nikolai took advantage of their distraction and leapt into a hole beside him. The Germans rushed over and threw a grenade inside. Fortunately, the wooden planks behind Nikolai suddenly collapsed, and he fell straight into a bunker, narrowly escaping with his life. When he woke up, Nikolai was overjoyed to discover that this was the armory he had been desperately searching for. Without resting, he and the comrades trapped there quickly made large quantities of explosives. Then under cover of night, carried weapons and ammunition toward the church. However, midway they were suddenly met with intense artillery fire, and Nikolai watched in horror as large numbers of German troops launched a night assault on the church. Although the defending soldiers fought with everything they had, the lack of ammunition made resistance impossible, and the church soon fell once again. Seeing the battle slipping away, Nikolai was overwhelmed with grief and wanted to fight to the end, but several comrades dragged him back to the bunker. After returning to the bunker, Nikolai was consumed by deep self-blame. He believed it was his failure to deliver weapons and ammunition in time that led to the deaths of his comrades, and that the loss of the church was entirely his fault. Overwhelmed by despair, he raised his pistol and aimed it at his own temple. At that moment, a young woman stepped in front of him and said through tears, "If you die like this, who will protect us women?" Her words struck Nikolai like a heavy blow, snapping him back to his senses. He slowly lowered the pistol and burst into tears like a child. After crying, he shaved his beard, changed into a clean uniform, and chose to go on living. Just then, a bespectacled soldier rushed in to report that one soldier had left the bunker without permission. Nikolai immediately realized the seriousness of the situation and led a group in pursuit. This is the raw ferocity of the fighting nation. A veteran Soviet soldier grabbed 2 bundles of grenades and leapt from the rooftop onto a formation of German soldiers marching below. With a thunderous explosion, the veteran perished along with a large number of enemy troops, dying a heroic death. In sharp contrast, another soldier raised a white flag and slowly walked toward the Germans. Lieutenant Nikolai burned with rage at the sight, raised his gun, and shot the traitor dead, then fired another shot to kill a German soldier. The Germans, furious and humiliated, immediately returned fire. Seeing large numbers of Germans rushing in, the two quickly split up to escape. In the smoke, Nikolai jumped into a shell crater, lifted a wooden door panel, and hid beneath it. The bespectacled new recruit hid in another crater. Unable to find them, the Germans used flamethrowers to spray each crater one by one, trying to flush out anyone hiding under the boards. Fortunately, the door panel was thick enough to block the searing flames, allowing Nikolai to narrowly survive once again. After the Germans left, he rushed to find the bespectacled soldier, only to see a notebook left on the ground, making it clear the young man was likely dead. Now, in the entire bunker, only Nikolai and the veteran remained, still fighting stubbornly. One day, while hiding among the ruins, the two saw a group of German soldiers holding a ceremony to celebrate the capture of the fortress. The veteran was completely enraged, raised his rifle, and unleashed furious fire at the awarding Germans. Caught off guard by the sudden attack, many Germans fell instantly, and once they reacted, they took cover and returned fire. Outnumbered, the two did not dare linger and quickly withdrew, but the enemy fire was too intense, and the veteran was unfortunately shot in the leg. Nikolai hurriedly supported him and retreated back to the bunker. Although the veteran survived, there were no medicines or bandages in the bunker, and he knew he would eventually die from infection. Now Nikolai could only continue fighting alone. In the pitch-dark bunker, Nikolai used the maze-like passages to appear and disappear at various exits, launching surprise attacks on isolated German soldiers. To gather intelligence on German movements, Nikolai captured an unlucky German for interrogation, with a girl acting as a temporary interpreter. The German claimed he was not a soldier but a newly transferred guard, saying the real German troops had established fire points and mobile units in the fortress that would immediately reinforce any contact with Soviet forces. He said he was only on sentry duty and had never fired a gun, begging for his life, saying he had an elderly mother and children to support at home. Lacking combat experience, they believed him, and Nikolai ultimately softened and let him go. Little did they know, this mercy would bring them catastrophic disaster. Soon, German troops arrived in the area, but after searching everywhere, they failed to find the hidden entrance. Enraged, the Germans began spraying flames into every place where someone could hide, while the people inside the bunker remained completely unaware. Before long, the Germans reached the entrance of their hiding spot, and as the flamethrower ignited, fire instantly filled the entire passage and spread straight into the bunker, watching the ant burn like a living torch. Nikolai and the other survivor were devastated yet powerless. The veteran, seeing this scene, was also consumed by grief and rage. After comforting the girl, Nikolai noticed the veteran was assembling bundled grenades. With the gunshot wound and his leg infected, the veteran knew his time was running out, but he refused to die in humiliation, so he instructed Nikolai that no matter what, he must protect the girl and protect himself. After saying this, he lay down on the bed and fell asleep. Although Nikolai knew the veteran had already prepared for a heroic sacrifice, he still wanted to stop him. He guarded the doorway all night, until exhaustion finally overcame him and he fell asleep. When he jolted awake, he discovered the veteran's bed was already empty. The two rushed out of the bunker to search, only to see the veteran standing atop the city wall, quietly watching the German soldiers marching below. Then he raised the explosives and leapt down without hesitation. In this way, the veteran perished together with the Germans, using his life to compose a tragic and heroic final song. At this point, only Nikolai and the girl remained in the bunker. Just like before, Nikolai went out at night to scout, occasionally firing cold shots at German soldiers from favorable positions, patiently waiting for Soviet reinforcements to arrive. At the same time, he also gained the girl's love, and the two depended on each other for survival inside the bunker. She bandaged his wounds, and he told her stories of springtime in Moscow. Amid gunfire and explosions, they even made promises about life after the war. Day after day passed, and on the 66th day of holding out, Nikolai suddenly noticed unusual activity inside the fortress. Many soldiers lined the roads to welcome a convoy. As a luxurious Mercedes slowly drove in, followed by several escort vehicles, two men stepped out, one with a small mustache, the other wearing an Italian military uniform. Surrounded by crowds and reporters taking photos, Nikolai guessed these two must be high-ranking German figures. He quietly took aim, hoping to seize the chance for a surprise attack. But before he could act, the two had already moved out of range. What he did not know was that one of them was Italy's Mussolini, and the other was the failed art student. He missed a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity that might have changed the course of the war. On the 135th day of resistance, fate once again bared its fangs at the couple. Through a narrow crack of light, he saw German soldiers bringing a large group of women to clear the fortress ruins. Although he was extremely cautious, he was still spotted by a sharp-eyed woman. Nikolai was startled and quickly hid, but to his surprise, after a brief moment of shock, the woman did not alert the Germans, instead excitedly telling her companions, "There are our soldiers inside. We have not lost yet." Looking at the narrow gap, smiles spread across their faces. Then, while the Germans were not paying attention, the woman quietly approached and secretly stuffed a bundle into the opening. When Nikolai picked it up, he found it was a bundle of warm potatoes. For Nikolai, who had not eaten a hot meal for more than 100 days, these few potatoes brought indescribable warmth and emotion. Nikolai also realized that these women were not prisoners of war, but free laborers brought from the city by the Germans. What delighted him even more was that night, his wife Mira shyly told him she was pregnant. The joy of becoming a father allowed Nikolai to temporarily forget the cruelty of war. He also knew that the bunker lacked food and medicine, making it impossible for a safe birth there. Nikolai thought of the women clearing the ruins. This might be the chance for his wife to escape. The next day, Nikolai had his wife change into civilian clothes, and while the women were clearing obstacles, he quietly let her leave the bunker, pretending to be an ordinary laborer carrying bricks and blending into the crowd. At first, the women were shocked by Mira's pale face, but soon they silently accepted her. Seeing this, Nikolai finally showed a relieved smile, but things were not as simple as Nikolai had imagined. Just as the women finished their work and lined up to board the trucks, the foreman suddenly noticed there was one extra person in the group. After a brief inspection, the unfamiliar Mira was quickly identified. Because she had not bathed for 3 months and reeked of filth, the foreman mistakenly believed he had caught a female Red Army soldier. Eager to claim credit, he immediately dragged her before the Germans. Unexpectedly, the officer he reported to was the very German Nikolai had once released. In order to hide the fact that he had previously been captured by the Soviets, he instantly ordered Mira to be executed on the spot, and cruelly threw her body into a deep pit. From the hole, Nikolai watched everything unfold, his fingernails digging into the cracks of the bricks, biting through his lips, forcing himself not to make a sound. His heart filled with endless grief and rage, he silently swore to avenge his wife and their unborn child. By the 163rd day, every last bullet in the bunker had been fired by Nikolai. To keep fighting, he could only sneak out at night to search for ammunition among the ruins. That night, when the foreman responsible for his wife's death called out to his companions and received no response, he instinctively stepped forward. Suddenly a gunshot rang out, and the foreman fell dead on the spot. Immediately after, the German who had ordered his wife's execution was also shot and killed. Nikolai had finally avenged his wife and unborn child, but the gunshot exposed his position, and German soldiers quickly opened fire in response. Nikolai immediately retreated, but in the chaos he tripped over a stone and fell. He hurriedly hid inside nearby ruins. It was now winter, and the footprints in the snow allowed the Germans to quickly pinpoint his location, hiding beneath wooden boards. Nikolai realized he was about to be discovered and decisively pulled the trigger, only to find he had no bullets left. The Germans immediately fired back, and when there was no response, they switched to stabbing the floor violently with bayonets. After several thrusts, one blade pierced into Nikolai's body. Clenching his teeth, Nikolai endured the searing pain without making a single sound. Just as the Germans prepared to continue stabbing, Nikolai saw a rat ahead and hurriedly waved his hand to scare it away. Noticing the fleeing rat, the soldier's attention was instantly diverted, and Nikolai once again narrowly escaped death. Having survived yet another disaster, he continued to hold his position in the bunker with no intention of retreating. By the following spring, the bunker had long since run out of food and ammunition. When the Germans finally found him, it was the 300th day since the outbreak of the war. After living in darkness for so long, his eyes had gone blind, and he could only grope his way forward. At the moment his weapon was taken away, he felt as if an officer supported him, and sensed comrades standing all around him. Seeing this scene, the German officer was deeply shocked and asked who he was. Nikolai slowly raised his head, as if gazing into the sky, and replied, "I am a Russian soldier." The German commander was filled with respect and immediately ordered his men to line up in 2 rows to salute Nikolai. What they did not know was that this man who fought to the very end had originally been just a new recruit who never even completed registration. With no official military status and no name on any roster, yet through 10 months of unwavering resistance and unbreakable will, he defined what it truly means to be a soldier. I am a movie enthusiast. Feel free to subscribe to my channel, and see you next time.